Okay, tonight we're going to look at the Parable of the Prodigal Son. This is a favorite parable, and I must say, it is one of the most exquisitely written parables. I mean, there's just hardly a wasted word in this parable. I mean, we could go on the Parable of the Prodigal Son for 3 hours. I could. You all might not could. I could go on for 3 hours. Because there are just so much that is in almost every sentence that we can talk about. So the big thing tonight is going to make sure we don't go 3 hours. So I may not get everything down I want to say tonight. You might not get to say everything you want to say tonight. So as we talked about in reading the parables as stories, we want to remember from 10th grade English class. And we want to begin first by framing the story. What's the setting? How is it set up? How are we entering into the story? And to do this, we need to think about what's happening right before the parable. Because Jesus just kind of hops in the parable. He says, then Jesus said, there's not much introduction with that. But as you remember, you are good Bible readers. As you remember, there are two parables that precede this. Parable of the lost coin, the parable of the lost sheep. And they are part of the introduction, the framing for this one. So this is the third parable. We'll come back to that. Again, a third is always a big thing in stories. But I want us to go back to the first 3 verses in chapter 15 because the two parables that precede the prodigal son have an introduction to them. And I think this introduction really is not just for the first of the 3 parables, but it's for the whole chapter. So, Luke 15, verses 1 through 3. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. So is the key word here, right? So is the word that connects what just happened with the first parable. So the parable of the prodigal son is really getting set up twice. It's getting set up and framed by the parables that precede it, which are very similar to it, but also by this encounter that Jesus has with the Pharisees and the scribes. Okay, so 2 levels of this are going on. So I want us to think about first these parables. We're not going to go deeply into the parables, but you've read them since you were a kid in Sunday school, right? Parable of the lost sheep and the lost coin. What's the point of those parables? What message comes across in those 2 stories to you? Anybody, what comes across in those 2 stories? Something is being sought, right? Something's lost, and someone is looking for them. Both are looking stories, right? What else? Thank you, Alice.
Rejoicing when it's found.
Right. As Aubrey said, there's rejoicing when it's found. In both cases, when the 100th sheep, the lost sheep, is found, and now the shepherd has 100 and not just 99, he calls out his friends, says, "Let's celebrate." And when the housewife finds her lost coin, she calls her friends and they celebrate. So, similar. When you find, you celebrate. What else do we see in those stories? Forgiveness. Yep. You did say forgiveness, right, Linda? Yeah. So, So something is lost, broken, and now it's found and back. Forgiveness is one way to think about that. Okay. I'm sorry. I can't tell one more time, Joanne.
Sorry.
Yeah.
They were prized possessions.
Yes. So the lost sheep and the lost coin were prized possessions. Okay? Even though there's nothing that indicates that the lost sheep was any different than the 99, or the lost coin was any different than the 9 that she had. So one question is, why were they prized? Was it just because they were lost? Huh? Anything else anybody's thinking about? So all these things are swirling in our minds. A lot of this is all about celebration and welcoming and grace and forgiveness and mercy. There's not really any judgment here, is there? Right?
No, but there is repentance.
Right. In the third one, right? In the first 2, there's not. And the coin doesn't repent, right?
Yeah. Chapter 15, verse 7. There will be rejoicing in heaven over the one sinner who repents than over the 99 righteous persons who do not.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Tom. As Jesus reflects on the story, repentance comes in. Yeah.
And the same thing is said in verse 10.
In with the coin. Yeah. Yeah. So both of those parables relate to this idea of forgiveness that Linda brought up, and repentance comes in. So what's lost is found. We're all happy. Okay? Now let's go back to how those 2 parables were set up. What do you think the grumbling of the Pharisees and the scribes has to do with these parables? Okay. So, but the contrast is the Pharisees who were not happy. Right. Yeah. So Jesus is happy to welcome sinners. The parables, lost coin and sheep, are happy about finding that which is lost. And the contrast is the Pharisees and scribes who are grumbling about this. Say that again, Mac, about acceptance.
Eating with someone meant acceptance and recognition.
Yes. Much more so in that culture than ours. You know, oftentimes we'll quickly want to have, if we see somebody at a restaurant that we casually know, oh, well, come on and join us. It was a bigger deal for them, and it meant acceptance. Yeah. Thank you, Matt.
They might be grumbling because in chapter 11, this is sequential. There was the 6 woes that Jesus just was unmerciful.
Yep.
Describing the Pharisees.
Right. It could be. Maybe they're thinking that once you get on somebody's bad track, it's hard to get in the good track, right? Also interesting, in if you go back in Luke chapter 5, Luke sets up this chapter 15 almost the same way as the end of chapter 5, where there's more grumbling with the Pharisees. It's interesting kind of to go back to. Yeah, Al?
First 2, they're probably looking for some form of punishment for having lost the coin.
Ah.
So why is Jesus not showing us the punishment for that service?
Right, yeah. So maybe the Pharisees and scribes are thinking there should be some punishment for these people that you're sitting with, and so they're grumbling. And the stories, should there be some punishment for the sheep that gets lost and the coin that gets lost, but it's not there. Yeah. So,
I see it as he's saying, these people are valuable to me.
yeah, it goes back to the treasured possessions that Joanne mentioned earlier. Yeah. So, whereas the Pharisees might be grumbling, these sinners, they're not valuable. They're beneath us, you know. And yet, Jesus tells these stories about something that's not, I mean, one coin, that's not a big thing. If you're a rancher, you got 100 sheep, you don't want to lose one, but really, you still got 99. That's not that huge of a thing. Yeah, but they were valuable that the shepherd would risk the 99 to go find the one lost. Yeah. Okay, so the parable set up in our minds. We're imagining that which some people want to say is invaluable is really valuable and important. We're imagining grace and mercy and not so much about punishment. And so we're heading into this third period with our third parable with these things in our minds. We're thinking about forgiveness and repentance, all connected in with that. So I've told you before that, when things come in threes, it's the third thing that has the trick in there, right? So, like I said before, a priest and a rabbi go into a bar, and whoever they go through third, that's the joke. And we've seen that in its other parables. The Good Samaritan first comes by the Levite, here comes by the priest, and the third one is the Good Samaritan. That's the plot twist. That's the joke. That's the punchline. So the question is the parable of the lost son the punchline? Is it going to be the twist? Well, let's find out. So let's read the parable of Prodigal Son has two parts, two acts. So let's read the first act, and then we'll go to the second act. So the first act is verse 11 through 24. Then Jesus said, there was a man who had two sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me. So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in desolate living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired hands have enough bread to eat and spare, but here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and I will go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands. So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is found again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. The parable began rather simply, right? A man has two sons. Have the picture now that happens so often in many stories, contrasting. Two sons, you know something's going to happen between these two. The tension shows up in the second sentence. The younger son tells his father, Father, give me my share of the property. In other words, he was saying, Dad, I wish you were dead. Give me what's mine. And I'll never look back. Now, I got to ask you all, what would normal parents do if one of their children would say that to them? Mom and Dad, I wish you were dead. Just give me what's mine and I'm out of here. what would a normal parent do? Wait, back, say that again. Yeah, don't let the door hit you in the back, all right? All right? Anybody else want to amen what Max said or add to that?
I'm not dead yet.
I'm not dead yet.
I'll take you out on the wheel tomorrow.
That's right. There you go. I was thinking more like you, Aubrey, yeah. Yeah, you might have been in the wheel, you ain't now. Yeah, but this father does not act like normal parents as we've just outlined, right? This father sells off either a portion of his property, or he has enough value in his livestock or some other investments, or maybe he has some cash that can equal a third of the property, because assuming this family operated according to Jewish custom at the time, the older son would have received a double portion to any other sons. So roughly the way this would have been divided, 2/3 would have gone to the older son and 1/3 to the younger son. So maybe if he only had to give up a third of his estate, he had enough cash on hand or livestock on hand, could be easily sold and give it to him. The brash son heads off to the distant country, the far country, a non-Jewish country. He was not only leaving family, he was leaving religion. Weren't any temples or synagogues where he was going. Notice that he squandered his money in good times. It was only after he had squandered his money that a famine comes. You know, when it's good times, that's when you're supposed to save, right? Right? When the going is good, you got to stuff your mattresses, right? Put it in the bank. Save it for a rainy day. This guy wastes his money during good times, and when the bad time comes, he's not prepared. So he hires himself out. They send him out to feed the pigs. Now, this may not mean too much to us. That's just a farm job. But as you may remember, pigs were unclean for Orthodox Jews. Even today, Orthodox Jews don't eat bacon. They don't eat barbecue. That's just... So for him to feed the pigs was shameful. It was dishonorable. It made him unclean. We don't really have a comparable thing, but something below a janitor was the kind of job he would have to do. So it would be the worst kind of job he was doing. And on top of that, he wasn't even making enough money to feed himself all the time. He looked at what the pigs were eating, this pig slop he was putting out there, and he was hungry to eat the pig slop. That's how bad it got. He had reached bottom. Then the plot pivots. Where's the pivot point? Anybody see where the pivot point is? Say that again. He's hit rock bottom, but what was the pivot point that began to turn back? He had an aha. Now, and how does Luke describe the aha moment? Or how did Jesus say it? He came to his senses. He came to himself. He looked at the man in the mirror. Right. And that was the beginning point of his comeback. Now, he doesn't at first have this great moment of spiritual enlightenment. It's first, look, I'm starving, and my dad's hired hands have enough to eat because he pays them well enough they can eat. He goes, I'd be better off working for my dad than working for these people. So it's first just a matter of filling his gut. Somewhere along the line in that process, he even goes deeper than that, because he says, I'm going to go back home and I'm going to say to my father, I have sinned against you and I have sinned against heaven. And I'm no longer worthy to be called a son. So the son that said, I wish you were dead, wants to go back and say, I'm no longer worthy to be called a son. Now that is a transformation. But it began with, I'm hungry and I know how to get fed. So he starts, the plot heads this way. The brash son who head off to the distant country now is going back. So the turning point comes with this, he came to himself. So the story begins with a statement, Dad, I wish you were dead. And the return begins with, how many of my father's hired hands have bread enough to eat? The action of the story begins when the young man heads off to a distant country. The action point of the return begins when he is determined to go back home. So you see this point of one direction and now the other direction coming back. The question is, how is his father going to treat him? Will his father treat him as a hired hand? Left as son, who wished his father dead, he returns as hired hand, no longer a son. But no sooner as we kind of get this plot twist worked out, when we get whiplashed again, right? Because as he's still a far way off, his father may be old, but he's got good eyesight, or either that, he has a good pair of glasses, right? The father has been waiting for his son to return. He's been sitting on the front porch and looking out on the horizon, waiting for this moment. And when he sees his son come over the horizon, he knows his gait, he knows him so well, he knows how he walks. And Luke says, Jesus said he was filled with compassion. And he ran. The old man ran, and when he reached him, he gave him a big bear hug and began kissing him. And the son starts with his confession. He starts to say the things that he was going to say, and he starts, does he finish everything he was going to say? No. Does not give him a chance. And notice that the father doesn't respond to him. The father interrupts his son's confession and says to his servants, quickly, let's get this party going. Give this son of mine a robe, give him the ring, give him the slippers, the sandals, and kill the fatted calf. We're going to celebrate. He doesn't even address his son. That's fascinating, right? That's fascinating. So he begins barking out these orders, and Act 1 in the parable ends the same way the two preceding parables ended, only we get more of a description. Both the shepherd and the housewife, when they find the lost sheep and the lost coin, they call out their friends and they celebrate together, and that's what happens in this story. In this story, the son returns, the lost son returns, and we begin the celebration, and we get to see what kind of celebration it's going to be. It's a big giant party, right? He is given the clothing of a son of this man, a favored son of this man. He gets the family robe, he gets the ring, he gets the shoes. And now the fatted calf, the one that you save for a special occasion, that's going to be killed, and the party is struck up. What's lost is found. The finder celebrates. But this parable continues. The plot twist is the continuation of the story. So the third parable follows the first two, but it changes because it's twisted with something else to tell. And maybe that hits us with the original framing of all the three parables, which is that the Pharisees and the scribes had been grumbling. Now the older son enters the plot. He's been away as well. The younger son goes away to a far country. The older son is just gone away for the first half of the parable. He disappears. He's not even there. He is inferred because the first sentence was, a man had 2 sons. And then the second sentence says, and the younger son. That's all we know. We don't know anything about the older son. He's completely absent. He's been away as well. He's also been physically away. Where has he been? He's been in the fields working. Okay? He's not wasting, he's working. He has to come back to the house just as the younger son had to come back to the house. So both are physically away. Now they're coming home, but they're away for different reasons. And they're coming home for different reasons. The older brother hears what's going on, says, what's happening? One of the servants tells him, and he's angry. Act 2 has a new tension. Act 1 begins with, Father, I wish you were dead. Act 2 is implied, I wish my brother was dead. Act 1, when the younger son returned, the father saw him at a distance and ran to meet him. In Act 2, when the older son refused to go into the party, the father heard about it, heard about his anger, and goes out to meet him. In both cases, the father goes out to the sons. The elder son pours out his heart to his father. I've been working like a slave for you. The younger son confessed his heart as well, professing, I only want to be a hired hand. I don't deserve to be a son anymore. The elder son confessed his heart, but he declared he was a slave to his father, not even a hired hand. The elder son complains that his father never gave him anything. Yet now this son of yours returns devouring your property with prostitutes, and you kill the fatted calf as if to reward him for such things. Verse 30 is loaded, right? Let's read that again. I mean, this is juicy stuff, folks. When this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him. What stands out to you in that statement?
He wasn't even willing to call the younger son his brother.
That's right, that's right, yeah. Every now and then my wife and I joke with each other. Something happens with our kids, we'll say, that daughter of yours. Yeah, this was not his brother. This was your son. I'm not connected. That's some of the rich words in this. What else stands out in that verse? Jealousy. Yes, jealousy. Yes, jealousy. What else stands out? I'm saying bitterness, yes. Jealousy, but also bitterness, yes. Not just jealous, but bitter about this. Bitter about this. Well, notice the word that he said, at least the New Revised, is devours. What's NIV say, or what do your Bible say? Squander your money, yeah. I love the devoured sound. This son of yours devoured your property. Consumed it. And what's this whole thing about prostitutes? This is the only time women are mentioned in the whole parable. It's a guy story. Oh, yes, Aubrey. How did he know that? How did he know that? Got word? Or was it all in his head? Okay. Maybe he's assuming maybe he did devour his money with prostitutes, but who knows? Maybe he's just making his brother look bad. That's right. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, but this extra interjection of information comes in. He's going to badmouth his brother. There we see the jealousy and the bitterness. I mean, this little thing is rich right here. Anything else stand out to you? Yeah, Jay? Say it one more time for me.
At the end of the day, he's complaining like the Pharisees were in the first two.
Ah, so that comes back to the framing at the beginning of the whole thing. He's complaining like the Pharisees and scribes were grumbling. Okay.
He also, like the Pharisees, he thinks he's earned what his father still has.
Yes.
He took himself out from under the umbrella of his father's love and said, I've earned it.
Yep, I've earned it. And notice where both of them came to the house from different spots. And where did he come? He came for the place he's been earning it. He's been out in the fields working. I've been earning it. I've been a slave to you. Yeah. Al?
I think it raises the question, is it that he's really complaining about the separation of property because it was said that he was given his share, or is he more concerned about not having his father's love?
Ah, okay. Al's we're getting deeper here. Is he complaining because he thinks he hasn't gotten a fair shake with the property, and now this brother's wasted stuff, and he's coming back, and is he going to want more? Or is he really complaining that he never felt loved? All right. Yeah. A lot here. So there is no plot twist in the second act. The second act in and of itself is the plot twist. It's the whole different part of the story. You know, when the lost coin was found, one of the other coins didn't say, well, she should have left that thing lost. You know, when the 100th sheep was found, the other 99 didn't say, you should have left that thing out. It was no good, following the wrong piece of grass. This is a whole different ballgame here. The father restores the elder son who feels like a slave. He said, you've treated me like a slave, but notice when the father spoke to him, he said, son. You're not a slave. Son. So he restores him just as he restored the lost son who was trying to say, I don't deserve to be a son anymore. The very first thing he did was he showed he was a son. And then the father, when he's talking to the elder son, he tells him, everything I have belongs to you. Our property has not been devoured. Everything I have is yours. The father then says tenderly, really, that we've restored your younger son as brother. Notice that whereas the elder son said, this son of yours, when the father speaks at the end, I lost my place. We had to celebrate because this brother of yours, verse 32, was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found. And so it comes back to the points of you all have been saying earlier about the value of people. Bill, you were talking about the value of people, and the Pharisees and the scribes didn't value the people Jesus was sitting with. This parable says everyone's of value. You can't call your brother this son of mine. He's your brother. All right, let's look at the character. We want to look at how characters are developed. So let's go to the characters. Think about the characters. The younger son's character is called into question from the beginning, right? Because he says, I wish my dad was dead. Okay, right? He's clearly broken the commandment to honor your parents. You can't really honor your parents when you said, I wish you were dead. But I want you to think for a moment. There are some important younger, brash brother stories in the Old Testament. Anybody can think of any? Jacob, yep. Esau, yep. Joseph and his brothers, yes. Those are two perfect examples. There's more, but those may be the best examples. The younger son in this story is obviously a scoundrel, but he's no more of a scoundrel than Jacob, right? Jacob steals his brother's blessing, okay? This son steals his father's money, claims that it's his own while his father's still living, okay? Different things, but they're similar. So we might be thinking, as this brash, provocative, selfish younger son heads off to the distant country, who else went to the distant country? Jacob and Joseph, for different reasons, but also off to different countries. So this story might be heading off into, this guy might be a hero. But that quickly vanishes, right? We find out that he squanders his inheritance. Jacob and Joseph, who went to the distant country with nearly nothing, Joseph sold into slavery, then worked their way into having a great wealth. This young man is given wealth at the beginning and then squanders it and gets down to nothing. So he is opposite of Jacob and Joseph. We might have thought, thinking, okay, maybe there's something here, but there's nothing there in the story. The similarities between the two vanish. The story says that he squanders his money in desolate living. There's a couple other times in the New Testament that word is used. In the cases, it means drunkenness or rebelliousness, or it's with a group of words meaning passions, carousing, drunkenness. So prostitutes aren't mentioned, but not positive, nothing positive there. Wild living, yes. NIV says wild living, yeah. What do you think it means that he came to himself? This is the pivot point in the first act. What does it came to himself mean? What do you think it means? Go ahead, Linda. He realized what he had done. Yeah, realized what he had done. What else? Yeah, Al?
Trying to put an age on this younger son. He probably was like 16 or something like that. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
So he probably got a little maturity about it and said, wait a minute, there is a real world out there, and I want to be part of that world, not this.
Yes, a little bit of life has taught him some hard lessons, right? Some of us have been to college, and some of us have been to the College of Hard Knocks. And this guy got a doctorate in hard knocks, right? And he finally learned something. Yeah. What else? So this is the pivot point. So we first think he's terrible, brash. Some may think, well, maybe he could be like Joseph and Jacob, but then no, that doesn't turn out. But then finally he hits rock bottom. He's been to the College of Hard Knocks. He comes to himself, and now he's going to change. So there's a transformation in his life. Let's think about the father. Sometimes people call this the parable of the loving father, because after all, there's two sons. We're only half the parable with prodigal son. So loving father might be good, but I kind of wonder if maybe they should call it the parable of the stupid father, right? Because he's really stupid, right? He goes ahead and gives this son his money. In fact, there's a lot of debate as to what this did to the family. That it was an honor culture in the first century world, in Judaism. We don't really know much about that. We're not an honorable society, okay? That's not a big thing for us. And so it would have been a dishonor among all the other fathers in the village that this man had given his son part of his property. So there's different writings in the book of Sirach, which is not in the Bible, but it's the intertestamental books. If you have a Catholic Bible, you will see the book of Sirach in it. It talks about that no father should ever do what this man did. Okay? There's some words in the Jewish rabbi's commentary that again say that a son that acts like this should be excluded from the community. But this father doesn't exclude him. This father gives him the money. So this father brings shame on the family. When people walked past their farm on the dusty path and seeing him sitting up there on the front porch looking at the horizon waiting for his son, they would have pointed out and said things about him and laughed at him while they walked down the road. When the elder son went into town to buy the seed to plant for the farm in that year, when he went in to say to the clerk at the store he bought the seed, could you give me some credit until we get the harvest? He said to him, well, why don't you just ask your brother for some money since your dad gave him all that money? And everybody in the room would have been laughing with their Pepsis and their nabs, right? This is what happens in this family. Maybe some of the jealousy and the bitterness is about what this stupid father had done to the family, brought shame on the family. This father does not act like a patriarchal father, Jewish father of the first century. He may act more like mother than father. When his bitter older son refused to come to the father, he goes out to plead with him, to ask him, to beg him to come inside. Now notice the son has already said to him very quickly that he has always obeyed his father, every command. So why doesn't the father command him to go inside? That's what any good patriarchal first century Jewish father would have done to any son not acting right. He would have told him, you get in there, you forgive your brother, you make things right. Just like he would have also told his younger son at the beginning of the story, that's not how you treat, you don't speak to me like that. Instead, he pleads and he asks him to come inside. Maybe they should have called this parable the parable of the loving mother, because that's what this father acts like. Now, I don't believe in those strict gender roles, but in the first century they did. The older son, as we said, is absent in the first half of the parable. Act 2 is the plot twist. According to Jewish custom, he should have been the favored one. He had the privilege in the family. He has everything. At the end of the story, we hear the father says, everything I have is yours. So the question is, why is he jealous? Why is he bitter? What do y'all think? Okay, yep. Even though I have plenty, my dad's pretty wealthy, and everything I have is mine. Is that rascal going to take some of that? Because even though I have enough, even though I have enough, it's not enough. I want it all. I don't want that rascal brother of mine have anything.
And possibly, as you described, paternalism in the way the Jewish customs and laws were at the time. This brother has probably been humiliated the whole time his younger brother's been gone, and he's been.
Yeah. So that could be a piece of that. Every time he went to the feed store, he didn't want nobody laughing at him. Yeah. That's right. Had to work twice as much. Yep. Yeah, if dad's watching on the front porch and watching, he's not working either. Yeah. So all this stuff's adding up. Don't use this parable for parenting instructions, right? Because one son says, Dad, I wish you were dead. And the other says, I've worked for you like a slave and you've never given me anything. So, yeah, this is not a parable you want to do as an allegory, because it doesn't make the father look really good in that way. So, it's unconditional love, yes. So let me ask you a question, because we're out of time. This parable's open-ended like the one that follows it, dishonest manager. My question to you is, does the older son go into the party? No? You don't think he does? Lanny thinks no. What do somebody else think? But his father didn't obey. He asked him, what do you think? You think he still would have did it? He couldn't help himself, right?
One thing about this parable that I can see you're struggling with is the fact that when the prodigal son came home, the father had compassion and brought him back before there was any repentance.
Right.
And he welcomed him back. And even when he tried to repent, he said, "Oh, no, come on."
Yeah.
There was no repentance. It reminds me of Jesus and the prostitute as well. He forgave her before she ever repented.
Yeah. And even with the elder son, he's begging him to come in and speaks tenderly to him. Your brother was gone. He was dead. We had to celebrate, didn't we? We had to celebrate. Everything I have is yours. You're not losing anything. Can we just celebrate together? All right, I want you to raise hands. I want to see this. How many of you think that the elder brother goes inside to the party? Raise your hand. All right, we got a few. How many think he stayed outside? All right, some of y'all didn't even vote. You don't know. That's right. Alice, you don't lose points if you guess wrong. Who knows what the answer is? And now, isn't it fascinating? Isn't it fascinating that Jesus did not complete the parable? Why do you think he did that? To draw your own conclusions. Yep, very good, Matt.
He's also showing that the older brother was maybe duty-driven. A
Ah,
lot of us,
yes.
I mean, sometimes growing up, when I became an adult, my siblings scattered and I was left, looking after the parents.
Right.
I became duty-driven.
Duty-driven, yes.
And I can see
How he felt. Yeah. There's a lot here. So I think also that I think Jesus knew one day he'd be talking to us. This whole story starts because the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled. They were the religious establishment. Who's the religious establishment today? It's us, right? It's us. Even though we'd like to think we're with the prodigal, it's really us, right? We're in the church. We're with Jesus now. And this parable is, I think, is still spoken to us. And Jesus wants us to figure out how we're going to answer it by whether we're going to go in and join the party or not. And I better end there since we're 2 minutes late. All right, Lanny, what's the last word?
Say one thing. I look at this like the word that came to my mind when you were saying this was steadfastness. And I look at this like the Father is like God.
Okay.
He loves both of his sons, like he loves us. And I think he's looking as, precluding or putting this on us as the same situation.
I think there's a lot to that, Lanny. And notice that God, the Father, if you're right, the Father wants both sons in and kind of says, could y'all just get along?
And the father gave that younger son free will.
Yes, he did. He gave both of them free will. Yeah. All right, we could keep on going for 3 hours. We got to stop. All right. Thank you, everybody.